Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the November 19th, 2018 Hingham School Committee meeting. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Happy Thanksgiving week. Our first order of business is item number 2, approval of minutes from October 1st, 2018. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of October 1st, 2018.
A second? Libby?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I have a comment on section 6.7. 6.7. Okay. That the minutes say Liza O'Reilly commented on the cost of the trip and questioned if we should be looking at the criteria for attending. And that wasn't quite what I had remembered I was referring to. So I wanted to offer that it should read, instead of attending, that it should read, we should be looking at the criteria for all trips offered each year, the costs, and which students are able to participate, to consider equitable participation by all students.
I think that's my recollection of
Okay.
what the overall point you were trying to make.
Yeah, that was.
Right, not about necessarily who was attending, but the equity of it.
Yeah.
Agree?
Oh,
All right.
okay. So I will share this right now with Kay so that she can fix them.
Any other items to note in the minutes? No? Do we need to approve
Just as amended.
as amended? All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All set, great. All right, item number 3, question and comments. Audience comments are always welcome as agenda items are discussed, but we've also set aside 15 minutes at the start of the meeting for any audience question, concerns. Anyone here this evening? Nope? All right, great, thank you. Then we will move on to item number 4, the superintendent's report. Dr. Gallo is not here again this evening, so Dr. LeBellois will give us the superintendent's report.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. Happy Thanksgiving in advance of the festivities to come later in the week. A couple of quick notes to make of information in your packet. The first is we had the kindergarten parent forum information session just a few weeks ago on November 8th, and it was incredibly well attended. So it was actually standing room only. All the elementary principals were there, and that at that time we provided welcome introductions, introduced our team. We also took the opportunity to explain to the community the process and timeline for kindergarten registration this spring, as well as we had 4 of our teachers, 1 from each school, was present, who then presented an overview of kindergarten curriculum and expectations relative to the sort of day-to-day life of a kindergartner. And then I provided the community with an overview, because we often get the question of what does it mean to be kindergarten ready, right? What are those skills that kids should have? And so last year, part of our work with our kindergarten team, we actually came up with sort of our teachers' perspectives on what makes somebody kindergarten ready, and those expectations and that information was shared with the community. Again, it was very well attended, and we had well over 120 people in there for the evening, and we got a lot of positive feedback that it was really helpful to have the information, and also share timeline and what to expect as the year unfolds, because it is fairly early in the year to be thinking about this. But that was part of the feedback we got from our community last year, was wishing they had some of this information sooner before the winter comes. So that was a success. I also, in your packet, you'll note the November 1st enrollment report. And I just want to make a brief note that we are up a net 9 over enrollment October 1st. And that came from move-ins across 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 9th grades, and one addition to our seniors, and one student moving out and one out of district. So we did see some influx from October to November. But that report is in your packet for you, as well as the October 2018 facilities report and the projected projects for November. As you know, from monthly, we'll get updates from Katie and Doug relative to facilities maintenance and ensuring plans in place to ongoing maintenance is taken care of and longer-term projects are planned. And so you have a summary of what was completed in October, as well as what they're projecting to be completed through November. And finally, you should also have a copy of Dr. Vinnis's Dear Special Education Community Letter, which was sent out to the special education community, welcoming new staff, reviewing some professional development and ongoing developments in the department, as well as providing some timely updates for different activities in the department. I also will note, just as an aside, is that I did submit, with Dr. Gallo's consent and discussion, comments to the FCC regarding the potential impact of their funding change relative to community-based programming, and wanted to make sure that the FCC heard our perspective that community programming is essential to our work as a district and in engaging our community. And so those comments were submitted to the FCC as a part of the open comment period.
I also sent my own personal comments
Okay.
as well.
Yeah.
Just
I think it's great. Yeah, it's important. And then one final bit of good news is Katie Roberts, who's not here just yet, notified us that we've, as you know, been working to implement the digital literacy and computer science standards throughout the district for the last number of years. This year, implementing our immersion model. And we, several members of our team actually were interviewed by WGBH and NPR on our work, and that segment on the Hingham's implementation of the digital literacy and computer science standards will air on Wednesday, November 21st, so this coming Wednesday, during Morning Edition and All Things Considered. And we will be sending out live links through to all of you, as well as to post to our social media in case people would like to listen in on that story, reporting, again, our work relative to digital literacy and computer science. Very exciting.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's like a week-long series
It
that
is,
they're
yeah.
doing on computer science in Massachusetts public schools.
Yes. So we will have the highlight, or take the spotlight on Wednesday.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
So, yeah, it's great.
So you're going to spoon feed us the information then?
Sure. We will, no worries. Yes.
You mentioned it, but you can ask a question.
No. Sorry, go ahead.
And that's it? No, that's all I had.
Okay, great. Terrific, thank you. All right, moving on, item number 5, communications. Jamie, do you have any communications received?
No, I probably might have taken the FCC comments out of
Okay.
order, but
No.
that's the only comments I
Okay.
have.
5.2, student communications. Emma Quilty's here tonight. Thank you, Emma.
Although no team won a state championship this year, all teams performed well at the high school. Very good records. The girls cross country team qualified for the first time ever for all states. And over the past few weeks, seniors have been signing their letters to play collegiate level sports. Our school has also added a new club called Mixed Material Arts Club, which is run by Officer Ford and Miss Kelly, and they had a meeting and a demonstration of what it was this afternoon. This past week and weekend, the drama program put on an unbelievable show called You're in Town. Also last week, the biology and oceanography clubs walked to Nantasket Beach to pick up any trash that they could find. And Hingham High School qualified for the WGBH High School Quiz Show, and that's like a 10 for 10 for them since the program has been started. Moreover, students were able to participate in an essay contest about the voice of democracy, and Billy Johnston, a senior at our school, placed first. Raffi Alexander placed second, and Carly Price and Julia Foley both got third. As you can see, Hingham swept the awards for the contest. Today, we found out that 8 Hingham High School students have been accepted into the MMEA SSD Music Festival. Also, 6 orchestra and band students also qualified for that. And to end the week, last week, on a positive note, the field hockey team played against the teachers and faculty, and the teachers did come out with the win, showing their school pride. And lastly, this week is Spirit Week for us. Today was the favorite, Pajama Day. Tomorrow's Wild West Day, and Wednesday's Hingham Pride for the pep rally.
Thank you. All right, 5.3, any other communications? Yeah. Okay. Moving on to item number 6.1, new business, to hear a report on MCAS testing from spring 2018.
Yes, that will be me. I'm just going to make a quick transition to the podium.
All right.
So good evening. I'm very excited to be here this evening to share with you the results of our students on the spring 2018 Massachusetts Comprehensive System for Assessment results relative to English language arts, mathematics, and science, technology, and engineering. I want to begin with a brief outline, but I also want to note that everyone should have received a bound copy of the actual physical report that was done of our performance, which gets, as you can tell from the information contained therein, in a lot more detail than what I'm going to cover this evening. And the idea is that it's sort of a 30,000-foot view of student performance and how we performed, giving you a sense of big picture areas for focus going into this year, as well as a good overview of how our students performed, but it doesn't get into anywhere near the detail that's contained in your written report. And so the two are meant to be complementary to each other. And so what I will ask is, if there's any questions as I proceed through, please feel free to pause and to interrupt. We're all friends here, so it's not as formal as it may be for other topics. It's really meant to be interactive, and if there's questions, stop me. Otherwise, my goal is to sort of give, again, a broad overview, and then the opportunity for questions toward the end. And so the goal tonight is to first start off by giving you an overview of our district accountability results. And that's also the beginning part of your report really outlines how these determinations are made. The next part we'll get into is the actual results. An overview of the next generation MCAS or MCAS 2.0. This was again shared with you last year when this report came in, but it bears repeating just to reset everyone's sort of collective understanding of the shift in assessment that MCAS 2.0 really does represent. Part 3 will be a results of the 2018 MCAS performance for all students, and then looking against how we performed relative to our benchmark communities. Part 4 will be the same idea, sort of overall results, but looking at two particular subgroups, our students with disabilities, as well as our high need students. And we'll talk a little bit about what makes up membership in those categories as we get to the presentation. And then finally, part 5 will be focused on next steps to give you, again, a 30,000-foot overview of the work that we're doing to ensure that the information is unpacked, distilled, collectively understood, and then progress is made toward identified areas for focus going forward. And so I'll first begin with district accountability information. And so at the top, we have a new model for how we calculate accountability. And what it does is it factors in the progress that we're making toward goals set during the 2017 baseline year. That's when baseline was established for the MCAS 2.0 assessment. And so what we have are calculations of the extent to which each building is meeting its targets for growth. Our middle school and our high school are partially meeting their targets, while East, Foster, Plymouth River, and South are in the 90% of meeting their targets. Now, what I will note is this also looks at the performance of all kids as well as the lowest performing 20% of the population, right? So that is a change in this accountability model. So what you see here is sort of in sum how well they're doing. And what you'll notice from the detailed information in the book is that you'll see a difference in performance for our all kids versus our lowest performing 20%. And for Hingham Middle School and Hingham High School, it's sort of the average of the both, which then presents as that percentage number. So they are going to be quite different depending on whether you're talking about all students or just kids who are in the lowest 20% or the lowest performing 20% of students. What I'll also note here is both Plymouth River Elementary as well as South Elementary were both 2018 schools of recognition under the new accountability system. Relative for Plymouth River, their recognition status came from their exceeding their targets. And South Elementary, their recognition came from high growth across their student population. So Mrs. Eastwood is here, the principal of South Elementary. So congratulations not only to Plymouth River, but also to the faculty and staff and the students at South Elementary for their recognition by the Commonwealth. From there, I want to talk to you a little bit about the percentile performance. So what this looks at is so with the targets being what they are, they still look at, so relative to other schools in the same grade span, how are you doing in comparison? And so what we find is at Hingham High School, they performed as well or better than 94% of 9 through 12 high schools in the state. Hingham Middle School performed as well or better than 80% of 6 to 8 middle schools across the state. And East Elementary at the 95th percentile, Foster Elementary at the 99th percentile, Plymouth River at the 95th percentile, and South Elementary at the 98th percentile. So again, this is in comparison to similar structured schools across the Commonwealth. And that is going to be independent of the extent to which they're making their targets. In your report, you might see one slide with it all in one, and that's to sort of give you that comparison that even though Hingham High may be at 59% meeting their targets, they're performing at the 94th percentile when compared against other same structured schools across the Commonwealth. Now we'll start by talking a little bit about the assessments our students took last spring. And this is going to be true of grades 3 through 8 in English, language, arts, and mathematics. Our science, technology, engineering exam is still sort of the legacy assessment, as was our grade 10 assessments for last spring. And so again, the next generation MCAS really updates a nearly 20-year-old MCAS assessment that's been used in Massachusetts for the last 20 years. It focuses on critical thinking, application of knowledge, and connections between reading and writing. It also, the idea was that it would give us a clearer signal of readiness to begin in the next grade level. And it's designed to be given on a computer, although there are going to be some paper-based assessments available for schools who may not be technologically ready or students who might require a paper and pencil-based assessment. And what you'll also note is there are new achievement levels. And they're not necessarily one-for-one correspondence, but I thought I'd present them to you side by side so you have some sense of what was and then what we're talking about now. Under the old model, again, we had advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and warning. Under the new model, it's slightly different, and it talks about kids who are exceeding expectation, meeting expectation, partially meeting expectations, and not meeting expectations. And it should be noted that partially meeting expectations all the way up through exceeding expectations is considered a pass score, where not meeting expectations is considered not passing the assessment at that level. If that makes sense. Because you'll see some of our slides talk about how many kids received a passing grade and then how many kids are at the meeting or exceeding expectations mark. And so you'll notice they're going to be a little bit different. So again, this is a sample feedback that explains on the student score reports that go home to families what the score results might look like. And so what you see are sort of the scale of the range of scores, the 4 performance categories, and then an arrow identifying from where your child performed, and there's going to be a confidence interval band that talks about the true score lies somewhere within this gray area. As we go on to the next part, it actually will give a little bit more information relative to where points were earned or not earned relative to the student's performance, and and also give you a sense of what question numbers were right or wrong on the same score report. So again, as we think about the revision to the descriptors, the new standards for meeting expectations are more rigorous than what used to be proficient level on MCAS, right? So that they've changed sort of the guidelines by which scores are assigned labels. Massachusetts educators set the new standards to help, again, signal readiness for the next grade. The old model did not give us the chart on the right there shows what the legacy results would look like, where you might see a grade spike in 3rd grade, then drop in 4th, and then go up in 5th, and there was no continuity across grades. It's projected that the MCAS 2.0 will look more like the performance on the left, which shows Massachusetts' NAEP results, which are more predictive and more sort of stable across time, where MCAS, you could see, was sort of up and down over years. And so the goal was, again, to create an assessment model that would give us a truer sense of whether kids are ready to engage in work associated with the next grade level. It also, not only does it focus on coherence, it also focuses on recalibration. And so the result does not mean that students learn less, right? If the scores went down or overall performance dropped, it's really that MCAS changed the way in which it's measuring student performance. That's just different. So that to make a comparison between past years is really not recommended. 2017 was the baseline year. That was the first year of the new assessment. And expected that the scores will change over time, just like MCAS did when it first debuted in 1998, right? So there was a number of years where it was making adjustments and sort of finding a place to settle, right, relative to performance. In some grades and subjects, the percent of students meeting expectations will be likely similar than what used to be in proficient. But in other grades, you'll see differences and will likely be lower than what we saw under proficient under the old model. So again, that's because they've reset the standard by which we gauge student performance. And it's fundamentally a different scale than what we were used to for 20 plus years. So now we're going to make our way and actually give you a 30,000-foot overview of how our students performed on these next generation MCAS assessments. So just before we begin, I want to set the stage by talking about what assessments were actually given, right? So in grades 9, for grade 9 biology, grade 10 ELA and mathematics, the legacy MCAS was administered. In grades 6, 7, and 8, ELA and math, next generation MCAS was administered. Grade 8, science, technology, engineering had legacy MCAS. And elementary, 3, 4, 5, ELA and math were next generation. And grade 5, science, technology, engineering was legacy. So this shows an overall analysis of the percent of our students who are meeting or exceeding expectations for last spring's MCAS administration. What you'll note is the first column will represent what grade we're talking and what subject area. We'll then get into how Hingham performed against the state. And again, we get into our benchmark comparisons in just a few minutes. And actually in the back of your book, the hardcover book, you have for every grade level and content area a more detailed description of where we fell compared to benchmark communities as almost an appendix to the report.
The screen is overall student, including high needs?
This is every single student in Hingham Public Schools when taken in the aggregate, so the average of everybody together. I'll just sort of briefly mention that we are well above the state pretty consistently across performance for all students. And it also gives us a sense of K-8, sort of how we're doing collectively across K-8. And ELA, 78% of our students are meeting or exceeding expectations against the state's 51%. Similarly in mathematics, 74% of our students are meeting or exceeding expectations compared against 48% across the state. And on the right side at the bottom there, what you'll see is the grade 10 scores. Because they were legacy, I don't present them as quite the same way as we get into the presentation. But again, 98% of our current juniors, so last year's grade 10 students, were 98% advanced or proficient. And that's, again, they're using the old language because they haven't quite transitioned over to the next generation yet. 92% in mathematics and 92% in science or biology. And you can see the state comparisons to the right there. So again, well above the state in mathematics and science and slightly above the state in English language arts. This is where we fell relative to our benchmark communities for our all students performance in grade 3 reading. This shows where we fell relative to grade 3 mathematics. What I will note is, in summary, 76% of our Hingham grade 3 students met or exceeded expectations, and that represented a 12% increase over last year's performance. We performed 10% higher than the state average in all content strands, language, reading, and writing, and performed above the state average on all 26 test items. In mathematics, 97% of grade 3 students earned a passing score on mathematics, on the mathematics assessment, with 70% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, with above the state average in all but one test question, and performed 10 points above the state average for the content strands of measurement and data, numbers, operations, and base 10, number and operations, fractions, and operations and algebraic thinking. This looks at our performance relative to our benchmark communities in 4th grade ELA, and this shows our performance in 4th grade mathematics. Again, the big takeaways here is 76% of our students met or exceeded expectations, which shows a 2% increase over last year's performance. And we performed 10% higher than the state average in all content strands, again, in language, reading, and writing. We also performed above the state average in all 26 test items. In mathematics, 97% of our students earned a passing score, with 77% earning a score of meeting or exceeding expectations. We performed at the state average on all 40 test questions and performed between 11 to 19 points above the state average for all content strands, including geometry, measurement and data, numbers and operations at base 10, numbers and operations fractions, and operations and algebraic thinking. And I'm going to pause here just to acknowledge our three content directors who are here this evening who played an instrumental role in pulling this data together. As I'm talking about, I don't want to take credit for work that wasn't mine. I really was the one who pulled it all together. But we have Dave Jewett, our director of mathematics. We have Mary Andrews. I'm sorry. She's making me nervous. Mary Andrews, our director of English Language Arts. And Katie Roberts, our director of science, all who played significant roles in unpacking this data and working with this data with our faculty. So I want to acknowledge their work, just as I don't want anyone to take credit for, I want to give credit where it's due, and they played an instrumental role in pulling this together. So I really appreciate that. To be able to sort of give you such a comprehensive presentation, really it takes a village, as Mary's always famous of saying itself. So that show overall performance summary for grade 4. As we sure can, Libby, yeah.
So, yeah, there. So for math, I see that it says that there was 97% that earned a passing score. So that would mean
3%.
Partially meeting expectations and exceeding. So
Correct. So if you take the top 3 categories, 97.
ELA,
I'm sorry, I didn't add this.
Yeah, we just parsed it out.
No, they just didn't. They did it differently. So
so would
So that's on your charts. We have that information in there.
I just didn't highlight it for the overall presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is it-
I added
I'm
it
just
on
easily
here.
confused.
No, we should have, I didn't know what I
If
was
you
looking
look
right
for the
next to
charts
it.
that look like
Okay.
that, they're kind of all over the place, but
It's right here, what was my big number?
76.
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah, so
Because
76
there would be
plus
more
22.
that
Would be
actually.
98 would be.
I mean, this is just, I just pulled up this.
I apologize for not being more
Then I'll
consistent
know how
in
to
the
read it when I
slides.
have to
So
read
it would have.
And
Would
every
have been
subject,
98.
when you come
Yeah.
through, you'll see.
So if we did it the same way, oh wait.
So you add up these three,
Right, or it's not meeting.
and then does it correspond to one of these?
Yeah, this is us, that's the state, so this is, obviously very much better than the state, which you would expect.
I see.
But every single slide that he shows you has that information.
Okay,
It just
on a
won't be
different
here.
slide, okay.
Yeah. So that number would be 98% achieved a passing score, but with 76% meeting or exceeding expectations.
Yeah, I know. I should have thought it. I buried the
On that side, clearly.
I know.
That's okay.
Right.
Everyone does it differently, and we all got to the same place. It's okay. This shows our benchmark comparisons for grade 5 English Language Arts compared against benchmark communities. This shows our performance in grade 5 mathematics against benchmark communities, and this shows our performance in grade 5 science, technology, and engineering relative to benchmark communities. At a 30,000-foot level, again, 82% of Hingham students met or exceeded expectations and performed 14% higher on all content strands and above the state average on all 27 test items. In mathematics, 81% were meeting or exceeding expectations. They performed at above the state average on all 40 test questions, and again, 13 to 20 points across content strands as identified there: geometry, measurement and data, numbers and operations in base 10, numbers and operations fractions, and operations and algebraic thinking. In science, 80% were proficient or higher, or 97% achieving a passing score. 55% achieved an advanced score in science compared to 18% at the state. I think that's worth noting. The strength of our elementary science program, 55% of our students in currently grade 6 earned an advanced score on the science assessment. And they performed at or above the state average in all 42 test questions. I think when we get to grade 6, we have something to celebrate here, particularly in comparison against our benchmark communities. So we lead the pack in grade 6 English Language Arts and in grade 6 mathematics compared against all of our benchmark communities. When we look at our performance, we saw an 8% increase to get us to 86%, meeting or exceeding expectations in grade 6 ELA. 18% higher than the state average in all content strands, again, in language, reading, and writing, and above the state average in all 27 test items. In terms of mathematics, 82% were meeting or exceeding expectations, with 99% earning a passing score, above the state average in all 40 questions, and 15 to 22 points above the state for geometry, expressions and equations, ratios and proportional relationships, statistics and probability, and the number system. Yes, Liza?
Did you do something different in English, or was it just the grade? Is it the cohort of students, or did you actually do something with instruction that you think contributed?
So I would say from once you have sort of a year under your belt to know what the new test is like, there you can start to look at things like, oh, okay, text features. We never made a big deal of that, but you seem to like it, MCAS people. Let's make sure you know. So some of the stuff is just sort of learning the new test. To be totally honest, some of it is a strong cohort, but also I think that once we have more sort of robust practice material at our disposal, it really starts to just logically pick up. And that's not to undermine all the hard work the teachers did too. It's just there's more to grab onto to get readier. Thanks for the NCLA right there. More ready. It's late. It's late.
So that, again, that's an overview of grade 6 performance. As we look ahead to grade 7, you see our performance in ELA against our benchmark communities. And the same is for mathematics. When we look at sort of the overall summary, 72% met or exceeded expectations for grade 7 ELA, 13% higher than the state average in all content strands, again, language, reading, and writing, and performed above the state average in all 27 test items. In mathematics, 67% meeting expectations or higher, with 98% earning a passing score, performed at or above the state average on 36 of 40 test questions, and performed between 7 to 12 points above the state for expressions and equations, ratios and proportional relationships, statistics and probability, the number system, and geometry. This looks at our performance in grade 8 ELA, and then again our performance in grade 8 mathematics, and grade 8 science, technology, and engineering. As we look at the performance summary in ELA, 78% met or exceeded expectations, showing an increase of 8% over last year's performance. 12% higher than the state average in all content strands, language, writing, and language, reading, and writing, and above the state average on all 27 test items. In mathematics, 98% earn a passing score, with 67% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, about or above the state average on 35 of 40 test questions, and perform between 5 to 14 points above the state average for geometry, expressions and equations, ratios and proportional relationships, statistics and probability, and the number system. In science, 94% earned a passing score, with 62% of our students earning a score of proficient or higher, above the state average on 39 of 42 test questions, and on average 12 points above the performance of peers across the state. And so all in all, as Mary just mentioned, as we get more experience working with the new assessment system and our teachers get more exposure, as do our students, we do expect to see our performances continue to increase. Now let's talk a little bit about the performance of two particular subgroups, our students who are high needs as well as our special education students. And again, the presentation will follow a very similar structure with the overarching results against benchmark communities, and then diving a little bit deeper to look at specific areas of strength and also areas that are going to have our focus going forward relative to those subgroups. So let's start with our high needs subgroup, and just before we get into this data, I want to just remind the committee and the public at home who might be watching who makes up our high needs subgroup. And so this is an unduplicated count of students in a school or district belonging to at least one of the following individual subgroups: students with disabilities, English language learners, and former English language learners, or kids who are economically disadvantaged. And so and you'll note that we do not have, for example, the population in the district to actually have an ELL subgroup because our numbers are too small, but their performance is factored into our high needs subgroup performance. So just keep that in mind. Whereas we do have a separate students with disabilities subgroup who will have their own sort of discussion about their performance, but just know this group contains unduplicated counts of ELL and formal English language learners, special education, and economic disadvantage.
What does unduplicated count mean?
It means so you can, if you're all three, you're only counted once. So your performance isn't counted 3 times. Under the old model, it was duplicated counts. So if you were a student with a disability and were ELL, your performance counted across both of those subgroups. So part of the arguments districts were making was we're getting sort of double, triple dinged for a student's performance or performance across multiple subgroups. The new model has unduplicated counts. So that if you're already included in the students with disabilities category, you don't get included again under ELL and again under economic disadvantage. So this, again, shows a 30,000-foot level of how our students in high needs performed against their state peers. And again, we do outperform the state across all subject areas and grade levels, albeit lower than what we saw, right, with our all students population. Again, in ELA, math, and science in grade 10, just to note them separately because we don't get into them in more detail in the presentation, 90% of our high need students were proficient or advanced on the MCAS, compared against 80% of the state. 61% of our students in mathematics compared against 57% of the state, and 62% of our students in science as compared to 53% of the state. This shows our performance relative to our benchmark communities in high needs for grade 3 reading, and the same is the representation here for mathematics. The ELA strengths was we performed at or above the state average for high needs students on 26 out of 27 test items. However, the opportunities for growth, after looking at their data more carefully, we know that we need to do more work relative to analyzing text features, finding textual evidence to support an idea, and drawing inferences. In mathematics, we performed above the state average for high needs on 33 out of 40 test questions, and their challenges included perimeter, distinguishing linear and area measures, telling and writing time to the nearest minute, or measurement time intervals in minutes, understanding that shapes in different categories may share attributes, right? So those are just some general broad categories of areas where our students did not perform as well as their statewide counterparts. This shows our performance for grade 4 ELA in high needs, as well as our performance in grade 4 mathematics high needs compared to our benchmark communities. The takeaway here is that relative to strengths, they performed above the state average in 25 out of 26 test items, and in mathematics out of 39 out of 40 test questions. Areas for growth in ELA include vocabulary and context, analyzing use of structural elements in writing, point of view writing, and explaining a central idea with supporting evidence. And in mathematics, we're looking again at place value understanding from multi-digit whole numbers, using place value understanding and properties of operations to perform multi-digit arithmetic, and classifying two-dimensional figures. This shows our performance in grade 5 ELA and high needs, as well as grade 5 mathematics high needs, and grade 5 science, technology, and engineering against benchmark communities. The takeaways here, performed at or above the state for all 27 test items in ELA, 39 out of 40 in mathematics, and 40 out of 42 for science. Opportunities for growth for ELA included analyzing how events affect character, point of view writing, and expository writing using textual evidence. In mathematics, converting like measurement units, classifying two-dimensional figures, multiplication, division, and fractions. And in science, looking more closely at misconceptions related to abstract physical science, improvements on open response questions, so the way our students are actually constructing their responses, including reading comprehension strategies and addressing multi-part questions or multi-step questions. This shows our performance of our grade 6 students in English language arts, as well as the performance of our high need students in grade 6 mathematics. The takeaways here, performed at or above the state average on 24 out of 27 test items in ELA, and 39 out of 40 test items in mathematics. Opportunities for growth in ELA include identifying how paragraphs contribute to plot, comparing ideas from multiple passages using textual evidence, and analyzing dictation. That probably should say dictation or diction. Analyzing diction. Okay. That's why the ELA director is here with us this evening. I got nervous. I made a typo in my slideshow. In mathematics, the opportunities for growth include writing equations, translating from words to equations, and writing an equation given a table of data. In grade 7, this shows our performance in ELA against our benchmark communities for our high needs, as well as grade 7 mathematics against our benchmark communities. In ELA, we performed at or above the state in 17 out of 27 test items and 36 out of 40 in mathematics. Challenges here included identifying vocabulary and context, determining theme, finding supporting evidence, drawing inferences, and analyzing an internal monologue. And in mathematics, geometry with three-dimensional shapes, volume of composite shapes, scale drawings, and factoring a binomial along, and it cuts off there, Dave. Do you happen to remember?
It's just factoring a binomial.
Okay, factoring a binomial, period. Sorry for that, just take out the along at the end of that sentence. This shows our performance with high needs for grade 8 ELA, grade 8 mathematics, and grade 8 science, technology, and engineering. ELA at or above the state average in 25 out of 27 test items. Mathematics at or above on 20 out of 40 test items. And in science, above the state average in 30 out of 42 items. Challenges here in ELA included analyzing text for theme, identifying vocabulary and context, finding supporting evidence, and perspective writing, as well as isolating details in a primary source. In mathematics, geometry, so rotations in a plane were an area of concern, as well as the Pythagorean theorem, specifically with line segment in a plane. Relative to science, our strategies for improvement focus on multiple choice, including practicing interpreting data tables, graphs, and diagrams, as well as open response questions, including reading comprehension strategies and addressing parts of a multi-step question. Now we're going to turn our attention and give an overview, again, of our performance of our students with disabilities. And again, a count of all students in a school or district with a disability as defined under IDEA who have an active IEP. That's how we determine who makes up that group of students. This shows our performance against the state across sort of a 30,000-foot view of performance across all grades and subject areas. What you will note is in elementary, we're relatively strong in comparison against state comparisons, but in the middle school, particularly grade 8 science, we are below the state average relative to the performance of our kids with disabilities. And again, this will follow a very similar structure where I'll give you an overview compared against benchmark communities, and then talk about strength and then opportunities for growth with with our population. This shows the performance of kids with disabilities in grade 3 reading and grade 3 mathematics. Overall, above the state average in ELA on all 26 test items, and above the state average on 30 out of 40 test items in mathematics. Opportunities for growth relative to our kids with disabilities population in ELA, including analyzing text features, writing to predict, and comparing main ideas through use of supporting evidence. In mathematics, perimeter, distinguishing between linear and area measures, telling and writing time to the nearest minute or measurement of time intervals in minutes, and understanding that shapes in different categories may share attributes. This shows our performance for grade 4 English Language Arts, as well as grade 4 mathematics. The takeaways here are in ELA performed above the state average in all 26 test items, as well as mathematics, all test items. In ELA, opportunities for growth included point of view writing, comparing structural elements, and explaining a central idea with supporting evidence. And in mathematics, place value, multi-digit whole numbers, understanding place value and properties of operations to perform multi-digit arithmetic, and classifying two-dimensional figures. This shows our performance for grade 5 ELA, grade 5 mathematics, in grade 5 science, technology, and engineering. Takeaways here in ELA, again, at or above the state in 25 out of 27 test items, 39 out of 40 in mathematics, and 40 out of 42 rather in science, and performed on average 15 points above the state for kids with disabilities in science, which is great, a great result. We have more work to do, obviously, but to see that performance above our state peers was promising. When we look at opportunities for growth in English language arts, we're looking at integrating information from multiple passages to determine an additional source, and using descriptive language for identification of inferences. In mathematics, we're looking at converting like measurement units, classifying two-dimensional figures, and multiplication and division of fractions. On science, looking at misconceptions, again related to abstract physical science, improvement in open response questions, including reading comprehension, and strategies in addressing each part of a multi-step question, or areas of challenge for kids with disabilities in grade 5 science. This looks at the performance of our kids with disabilities when compared to benchmark communities in English language arts and mathematics. In ELA, we performed at or above the state in 26 out of 27 items and 39 out of 40 in mathematics. In ELA, challenges included identifying how paragraphs contribute to plot, comparing ideas from multiple passages, and using textual evidence and analyzing diction. In mathematics, writing equations, translating words to equations, and simplifying expressions with an exponent were areas of challenge for our kids with disabilities in grade 6. As we look at grade 7, this is our performance compared against our benchmark communities in ELA, and then again in mathematics. The strengths here for ELA performed at or above the state average on 24 out of 27 test items, and performed at or above the state average in 37 out of 40 test items in mathematics. Opportunities for growth in ELA include identifying vocabulary and context, and finding supporting evidence and analyzing internal monologue. And in mathematics, geometry, scale drawings, surface area and volume, and factoring a binomial were areas for improvement. This looks at our performance of our kids with disabilities in grade 8 ELA, grade 8 mathematics, and grade 8 science, technology, and engineering. In terms of ELA, at or above the state average in 25 out of 27 items. In mathematics, above the state in 29 out of 40 test items. And in science, 33, outperformed the state in 33 out of 42 test items. Opportunities for growth here in ELA grade 8 focused on in analyzing text for theme, identifying vocabulary and context, finding supporting evidence, interpreting descriptive language, and understanding point of view selection. In mathematics, rotations in a plane. Dave, you're going to have to help me out with this next one. Graphing using y equals mx plus b. Okay, thank you. Determining if a relation is a function from a table of values. And in science, again, open response questions and multiple choice are an area of focus. The other slide I wanted to present was we often get a question relative to the number of our students with disabilities who did not take the traditional MCAS and took an alternative assessment, and our total N for last year's administration window was 13. 1 from East Foster Plymouth River, 4 at South Elementary, Hingham Middle School, and Hingham High School, both at 3 MCAS alts. And just to remind the committee, there is a decision-making tree that our special education teams walk through relative to making the determination about eligibility for an alternative assessment. So I just want to provide that for you in case you get any questions, if there are any questions about that process. But again, it is a discussion that happens with each individual student's team to make the determination of whether or not a student will take traditional MCAS or take the MCAS alt. Now I want to spend a little time talking about next steps and sort of the process that we're going through to better understand this data, roll it out to our faculty, and take steps for improvement for next year's performance, or this spring's assessment. Sorry. So I'm going to start at, sort of at the district level. So analysis of district and school level data and student results, item analysis, and disaggregated results with our teaching staff. That's done through our department directors as well as our principals and assistant principals, who ensure that teachers have a strong understanding of how the students performed and how best to meet the needs of the population of kids who are in front of them. So we look at not only the performance of the kids who have left them, but also the performance of the kids who are sitting in their classroom in front of them for that school year. We continue use of MCAS scores, item analysis, and additional assessment results to track and monitor individual student performance and cohort results. Continued opportunities for students to practice answering a variety of question types and assessment measures and practice test-taking strategies. So as you go from taking paper and pencil assessments to online assessments, we continue to want to provide opportunities for our students to get experience with that and have an opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge on the use using a device rather than just their own hands or the paper and pencil output. Continued emphasis on the use of instructional strategies which promote critical thinking, extended problem solving, and writing for a variety of purposes. Use of supervision and evaluation process to ensure consistent implementation of curriculum standards across all grade levels and content areas. We are currently working on the redesign of our K-5 intervention program, as well as the implementation of a 6 to 8 intervention program beyond our Title I program that's there offered now at Hingham Middle School. And both of that last bullet are both in progress now for implementation, hopefully for next year. Strategies for improvement relative to elementary ELA. So again, targeted implementation of the standards-based reading program Journeys. Integration of Journeys reading program with Empowering Writers, which is our writing program, to best scaffold and reinforce writing in narrative, expository, and persuasive forms. District-wide small group tiered instruction in grades K through 5. And regular practice with standards-based reading assessments, incorporation of writing standards across all content areas, right? Regardless of what content you're in, the influence of literacy and writing skills is sort of going to be displayed across content area. We also have direct instruction on responding to questions that compare multiple texts, as well as reviewing documented MCAS prep guides created by reading specialists and shared with teachers in grades 3 through 5. We give opportunities for our kids to take online test-taking practice and ensure familiarity with format and the tools and how you respond on a computer is different than you would in paper and pencil. So understanding knowledge of things like text boxes and how you got to keep writing, it'll keep going, even though the box is they only show you so much space. The idea that will continue to grow as the student writes are just things we want to reinforce and practice with them. An inclusion of special education teachers in curriculum meetings and ongoing discussion discerning MCAS findings and strategies for improvement. We want to make sure that that everyone is treated as a member of that team, and that collectively everybody on that team is working toward the same goal. In mathematics, again, strategies for improvement at elementary level include district-wide tier instructional coaching for all classroom teachers with a particular focus on differentiated instruction using the math workshop model, which is just a methodology for delivering instruction to kids. District-wide instructional coaching on number talks to help students, classroom teachers promote flexible thinking within base 10 arithmetic. Increase practice models on new question types. Team meetings between grade levels. An elementary math specialist to discuss building-based areas of strength and opportunities for growth relative to mathematics performance. More coordination between the math department and the special education department to discuss areas for improvement and strategies therein. Our classroom teachers and our math specialists are really our content experts, and then we have our special educators who are our instructional experts. So really by combining those two, we're hopeful for sort of progress for that, particularly for our kids with students with disabilities, but really for all students relative to growing instructional pedagogy for all learners. We also are thoughtful of continuing to develop power standards and elementary progression of standards through multiple grades, and this is where we support our teachers in really focusing their attention on 8 to 10 to 12 core standards, rather than sort of really having to sort of work through an entire standards book, which might get a little overwhelming. So again, it helps us target and focus our instruction to ensure all that we do are really hitting back to those core power standards that we've developed collaboratively with our teachers. Increased support for struggling learners via elementary mathematics tutors. So again, the addition of those tutors this year was a huge help as we work to improve the our mathematics performance across the elementary level. We also are thoughtful of reviewing the depth and rigor of Everyday Math 4 units of study and adding supplementary materials as needed to complement the program that we use as a core. In grade 3, geometry and measurement with area and perimeter remain area for focus, and supplementary materials related there too. Grade 4, multi-digit arithmetic on numbers less than 1 million. And grade 5, classifying two-dimensional figures based on their attributes while maintaining a focus on Everyday Math 1 and 2-day open response units. So again, a lot of work going on to make sure that our students' performance continues to increase over time as we work to implement these key takeaways. Strategy for improvement relative to grade 5. Examine, again, misconceptions related to abstract physical science content by analyzing the most common second choice answer. And you can see some examples of the correct answer and the second choice and how we responded versus how the state responded. And that really gets at the question might present an answer that has in it a common misconception about the content or about the skill that they're assessing. When it's designed, they have to be more thoughtful, and if you just do a plain text reading the first time out, may not be well prepared to actually go through a process of elimination where we eliminate that choice as erroneous or not correct because it's a misconception. We also are thoughtful about open response questions, including reading comprehension strategies, for example, highlighting relevant content, circle the action word, and addressing each part of a multi-step question. In terms of middle school English, ELA, adoption of department-wide goal to implement strategies from reading nonfiction, notice and note stances, signposts, and strategies in an effort to promote improved reading comprehension of nonfiction. Small group instruction in reading labs for students demonstrating need for additional reading support. Incorporation of current events articles for expository nonfiction practice and writing with those types of texts. Targeted grammar instruction through a language network and other resources. Collaboration across disciplines to incorporate common reading comprehension strategies. Reviewing the MCAS prep guide created through the ELA and reading specialist collaboration and shared with teachers in grades 6 through 8. Direct vocabulary instruction using the Classical Roots program. Direct instruction on responding to questions that compare multiple texts. An ample opportunity, again, to get familiar with the online test-taking format and question types and structure. An inclusion of special education teachers, again, in curriculum meetings and ongoing discussions concerning MCAS findings and strategies for improvement. In terms of middle school math, the 6 to 8 computer-based MCAS are still in their infancy. Math department staff will have multiple professional development sessions to continue to prepare for technology-rich questions. All 6 to 8 students will practice 2 different online math tests as part of their preparation to take the assessment online. Adapting exams to include multiple select items, and working to learn new technology to help create technology-rich questions in day-to-day instruction, just like they'll see on the MCAS assessment. We don't want it to be something special that happens in the spring. We want it to be embedded in their instruction throughout the year. Increased communication between the math and special ed departments to ensure a smooth transition to the online platform for all of our learners. Grade 6 Title I supports will continue to identify gaps in students' knowledge. Shifted staff priorities to offer very small math class sizes to our most struggling 8th grade learners. Blended learning offerings in grades 6, 7, and 8 so that students can independently work toward improving areas of weakness, as well as the evaluation of the Math 8 curriculum and whether we in progress toward Algebra 1 proficiency in 8th grade. So there is discussion ongoing relative to adjustments in the 8th grade curriculum moving toward Algebra 1 proficiency by the time they finish grade 8. Yes?
What is a blended learning offering?
So we use IXL, Prodigy, and then at high school we use Alex. So they're all, in essence, they all do the same thing. So students, the blended learning environment is such that the kids will come in, they'll have 30 minutes of regular class time and say 15 minutes on the IXL program. So the programs themselves are artificial intelligence based, and they ask questions. They do a baseline testing of the student's ability level, and then from there, the students, when they're doing their time on that program, they're literally working on standards that are appropriate to their skill level. And so what we found is that, especially in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, when it was 6th grade, we pick up a lot of kids that came from all sorts of different places, not just our 4 schools, but also, even just when you have all the kids coming from 4 schools, you just don't know them as well in that first year. So we were finding that to identify kids with gaps, it was hard it was hard to figure it out really quickly, and this was a really good opportunity for us to sort of help them have another way to address that. It was also, I think, for parents, really try to reach out to them and say, because a lot of times we hear, well, I don't know how to help my student with math, or I don't know what to do to help them get better outside of maybe, flashcards for their math facts. And all of these programs, they all say, if you use it with fidelity, if the child spends about 50 to 70 minutes a week on it, that they will show growth and improvement. So with parents, we can say, well, you may not be able to sit down and work on their homework with them, but we can do that and help troubleshoot that part. If you can at very least make sure they get on and spend a little extra time on the program, they can help sort of address their own needs.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Very well.
Great. As we look ahead, strategies to improve in grade 8 science. Strategies to improve on multiple choice, including practicing interpreting data from tables, graphs, and diagrams. Again, improving our open response questions, or responses rather, including reading comprehension strategies and addressing each part of a multi-step problem. And inquiry-based units in grades 6 and 8 target curriculum areas highlighted in the Next Generation Standards, potential expansion of the Hingham Middle School STEM program would again further align our work to the new assessment structure. And these are just some examples of open response questions in science and sort of some of the challenges that might. Katie, do you have any comments about this?
Just showing interpreting novel diagrams is one challenge. The other is addressing multi-step parts of a question is another challenge.
Yeah.
And then there's also a lot of they purposely put in a lot of extraneous information in there that isn't essential to the question. So really getting the students to practice those skills of highlighting the essential information, so they're extracting that, and getting them to ignore the parts in there that are not relevant to the answering the question. So,
Great. But that's what, by the way, a multi-step question would look like in the assessment structure, right?
And
So.
it looks like your high school chemistry and physics because it is very hard.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about students with disabilities and the improvement there plan from Dr. Vinnis in the Student Services Office relative to the performance of our kids with disabilities. So again, the department's focus on measurable goal writing and associated data collection methods to track and monitor student performance is going to be key. Ensure IEP goals are aligned with grade level learning expectations and content. And where they are not, make sure that that's clearly articulated within the IEP so to ensure a consistency of implementation across all teachers and content areas. Content-directed professional development in English language arts, mathematics, and science, and teacher-level data analysis of student responses. So that the teacher liaisons who actually work with those students actually have an opportunity to look and see how their students are responding, which historically was reserved for the classroom teachers and not necessarily our special educators. So you've heard the ELA and math talk about bringing special ed into that loop. And you see it here as well, where those teachers are expected to be looking at their student data and performance and make adjustments there too, to look at areas of strengths and weaknesses, how each individual student performed. We also have increased tiered instruction support at the elementary level and frequent high-quality PD opportunities for faculty and staff and across content areas. So it's important that our special educators have the opportunity to grow their pedagogical skill and understanding across all content areas, whether that's in reading and literacy, mathematics, science, technology, engineering, etc. We also have targeted professional development in the following areas. So again, a new special education teacher induction program, which was introduced a couple years ago to begin to prepare our newest educators for a smooth transition into the culture here in Hingham. We just rolled out on our first PD day, the first of our 3-part new Paraeducator Institute, which is a professional development opportunity for our paraeducators to ensure consistency of information and expectation communication to paras in their first, second, and third years of service with us. It also helps with, as we have a high turnover rate in our paraeducators, ensuring that every year as the new cohorts come on board, we're sort of guaranteeing that all paraeducators have the same base knowledge that they're delivered in their first 3 years. Early childhood fundamentals and strategies for best practice is a professional development offering that's running as a part of our PD program, as well as differentiated instruction for general education teachers, so helping our general education teachers learn, practice, and implement some differentiated strategies to ensure all kids find success in our rigorous program. How to become an effective para at the secondary level, basic functional behavioral assessments to behavior support, language-based learning disabilities and executive functioning skills, using a strengths and challenges model to hold IEP meetings and write individual education programs. And that initiative is actually kicking off tomorrow with Dr. Vinnis and the department in a day-long professional development for the special education department, and a 3-part special education workshop using metacognitive strategies to support academic acquisition, using metacognitive strategies to promote executive functioning skills, and defining and conceptualizing specialized instruction, as well as the overview and sort of the Student Services Office taking more ownership relative to the District Curriculum Accommodation Plan and the access that we give all of our kids to our rigorous program. We also have student support activities, including monthly elementary, middle, and high school special education department meetings. There's ongoing regular meetings monthly with our psychologists, with our team chairs, as well as after-school targeted math instruction at the middle school and high school, as well as a middle school and high school executive functioning pilot programs to support our students. Also administrative support relative to updating the special education procedures manual, and then professional training on the implementation of our procedures across the district. And that concludes my 30,000-foot overview of our performance of all students, our high needs, as well as our kids with disabilities, as well as the beginnings of our action plans to ensure continued success and progress for all of our students. And I'll be happy to come up for air and then take any questions that there might be. I'm just going to transition back to the desk if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Questions, anyone? It's very comprehensive. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for your work in putting this together. Anyone? Questions?
I have a question.
All right.
So, looking at the students with disabilities and the other benchmark communities, I looked across 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and just did a pass of like who was consistently performing above us. And you know, everybody jumps around, so there's no one town. But so it seems like Weston, Wellesley, Needham, Lexington, Winchester, Carlisle. And I'm wondering, do you reach out to them, or do you ever talk to them and ask them, what are they doing? But also then, what's your cohort of students? Are they more high functioning than ours? Do you have so many more staff, or just to get a sense of why is this trend happening, and can we learn from that, as opposed to, I mean, I know it's hard to unpack the whole thing, and especially with that category, but as it seems like it's a pretty consistent average of performing better than our students, and can we learn from those communities?
I had the same thought, especially when I saw Carlisle up at the top.
Yeah, oh, can you come to the microphone?
I had the same thought when I saw Carlisle up at the top. frequently, to consider asking them or reaching out to them and finding out what they're doing in terms of intervention. I'm also in a professional development group, which meets in Weston with Weston people, so that's actually an easy one to get at. One thing I would like to look at is the numbers of students that they
Right.
have in comparison with ours, because the percentage ends up looking a little bit skewed if the numbers themselves are pretty different.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how many students who are students in the high needs group in a place like Carlisle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the
because-
first step, and then yes, absolutely,
Right,
be
okay.
a great thing to do is
Okay.
to look into that.
Yeah, because I did take into account if it's a different number of students,
Right.
if they have different disabilities,
Yeah.
and but that would be helpful then for us to know how we compare,
Exactly.
to have that more
Yeah,
information.
exactly. I totally
Okay.
agree. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Carrie?
I just wanted to say, this is great, and thank you, Jamie, for doing that. I was looking at the numbers of where our students fall as far as kind of along the way, and it's between 70 and 90%, or it's like between 70 and 85% were meeting or exceeding expectations. And for students with disabilities, it was kind of between 10 and 30%. And I know we're exceeding the state average with a lot of those too, but I would really like to maybe make sure that we have high expectations for these kids too, and like 30% is, we can do better, I think. So I just wanted to put that out there. So, okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing it up. And I think and I think the people that are here, our faculty and our staff, would echo, right, that the idea that we want all of our kids to find success and to find a rigorous opportunity to engage in our curriculum and ensure success with that. So I think that's always at the forefront of our work, is ensuring access for as many kids as possible. But your point's well taken, and we can do better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
So just for clarification, do you get a copy of the MCAS test? Because it
No,
didn't say
of the
which-
test itself?
Yeah, because it does say on the
They'll release
report-
certain questions to us, but we don't get here's the third grade, a test that we gave last year.
Roughly half of the questions are released, so half of the questions are recycled in future years and they're not released.
Okay.
But each year they release, of my 42 science questions, 21 are released each year.
Okay, because it does tell, I guess, for each student which questions they got correct and which ones they
Got it.
missed.
Right.
So was that where you got the growth, where it says growth opportunities? Was it based on the feedback from those 21 questions then?
All of the questions, so for all 42 of my science questions, I know which standard was tested, but only for half of them did we get the actual question. But yeah, so that's when we're looking at curriculum, we look at which standards our students are doing well or not doing as well in. But then the instruction piece also comes down to analyzing individual questions. So again, something like the science misconceptions. It's hard for me from seeing a standard. Okay, great, I know it's from physics, but what portion of it?
Right.
So until we see the question, it's really hard to delve more specifically into the instruction.
And you know, like one of ours, I think it was grade 8, or one of our subgroups had Pythagorean theorem specifically with finding the distance of a line segment in a coordinate plane. We teach Pythagorean, and you know, if I just said Pythagorean theorem, the teachers would lose their mind. Like, we teach Pythagorean theorem so many different ways, and we do it in a word problem. We have a tree with a shadow with a similar triangle. We even teach it in a plane where we're doing rise over run, but sometimes you get the question, and that last year we didn't get the question. And so I remember talking to the teachers, well, how are all the different ways that we maybe see this? And so then we said, well, maybe they give it to us in a square, and we're doing the diagonal of the square. Let's show them that. You know, so it gets a little tricky when you start chasing the questions as opposed to chasing the standard. But sometimes this particular year, they said, all right, the way we'll teach it this year is we're going to put 2 dots in a plane, and it's a line segment. The kids need to know to draw a triangle and actually create a triangle. And our more concrete thinkers will look at that line and go, I'm not seeing a triangle, versus if they had the triangle there, and it doesn't mean they didn't practice it, but if they had a problem with a triangle that said find the distance of a shadow, that again, a lot, especially in the word problems where they're creating a story and they're drawing pictures and they can see it, a lot of times that is a lot easier to see. So it's a long way of saying it depends on whether, sometimes it depends on what questions we get to, really kind of shape where we go. And last year, and there's a couple other things too, because they've shifted over to the digital formats, the test developers, we met with them earlier at the end of last year, and they were talking about this idea that any old question that was still a standard that they could use that was just easily turned into a digital question, it was a multiple choice question, and now it's just you just click A, B, C, or D online. That was a question that they could continue to share because they have tons of banks of those questions, but they need to field test the digital rich questions. And so they're not releasing as many of those because there's so few of them, and they're not going to put more of those out there until they continue to get field tested. So last year we only got 6 questions for math. This year we get a lot more. I think we had like 21, 22. So we got a lot more data at least to look at. But I think over the next few years, as they get a much larger bank of digitally rich questions that have been vetted, then we have more opportunity to at least see a little bit more what's affecting the digital part of it.
We're still really in the vetting phase as far as 25% of the exam for ELA is our matrix questions. They do 4 essays in 2 days, 4 2-page essays. Their expectation would be 5,000 characters, or the approximate of 2 pages. And one of those 4 essays and the 8 questions from the paired passages that go with it don't even count as 25% of the time they're spent taking on the test. Right? Essay and even attending the webinar last month with some of the 10th grade teachers to get ready for our first go at Next Generation this spring, they still hadn't decided yet. They were talking about looking at a triple passage for one of the essays for high school. And when I'm typing furiously online to webinar people, is that really going to happen? Or are you going to give us a sample? And I was like, no, and we don't know. We said it might. And if we do, they would approach it the same format as a paired passage. And we were sort of like, or not, because that really affects how you organize your thoughts and delivery. So I think it's probably worth reminding as we go into the spring, there is going to be a hybrid scoring system used at the 10th grade level for graduation requirement for the first 2 years, so that there's some wiggle room for everybody to make sure that all of a sudden it's across the state as far as graduation, because the stakes are so high.
If you remember Jamie's first slide that showed the comparison to the NIC testing, they said that's not going to happen for the next 2 years. It's going to be consistent to what we've had for the standards, for the legacy, even though they're taking new tests.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
I appreciate it.
All right, no more questions. We'll move on to item 6.2, but we're actually going to table item 6.2. It was to appoint a temporary district representative to the South Shore Collaborative, but given their schedule and the timing of Dr. Gallo's return, it isn't going to be necessary to have someone. And there may be a meeting that Dr. Jamie will attend for Dr. Gallo, but there's really no sort of upcoming meeting, so we don't need to move on that tonight. So, item 6.3, to receive notification of the appointments of Matthew Campbell, paraeducator at Hingham High School, and Teresa Henderson, assistant teacher for Kids in Action. So, welcome to those.
Welcome to Hingham.
Welcome to Hingham. Glad to have you. And then we are receiving notification of the resignation of Jared Grimm, a paraeducator at Hingham Middle School. So, thank you to Jared for his time in the district. Item 7, any other items not reasonably known 48 hours in advance? Anyone? No? All right. So item 8, subcommittee and project reports. Let's start with the mask conference. So myself, Libby, and Carrie attended the conference down on Cape Cod. And for a superintendent and school committee conference, it was absolutely fascinating. It was really, really interesting. So I highly recommend it to anyone. It was the first year that I had gone, and I know Liza's gone several times in the past, and I think Carlos has gone as well. But really interesting stuff. Just so great to be with like a group of people who are, all in the same, trying to row in the same direction, right? And everyone's so, enthusiastic about the schools and about children. There were some really great speakers there. So anyway, I was going to have Carrie and Libby give just a quick couple of minute update on some of the more, not important, but some of the things that really stuck with them at the conference. Do you want to go first, Carrie?
Yeah, I agree. It was great. It was a great conference. I really enjoyed it, and it was nice to meet everyone. I loved actually everything I went to, but the two I was going to talk about today is community engagement and social media. I went to it because I'm on community outreach, so that seemed to make sense. And the community engagement one, the person who did it said the goal is engage optimism. So. A community that wants to support the work of the district. So it was kind of, they talked about the different ways of engaging with the district. So it was informing, consulting, involving, and collaborating. So informing would just be kind of like one way, putting information out, which we do a lot. And there are different things. The involving would be more like the kindergarten forums that you did. So you get feedback from parents, but it was also giving information out. And then the collaborative would be kind of like some of the task forces that are going on this for social, emotional, and special ed, where you kind of bring stakeholders together and kind of work as a team on policies, like not the day-to-day, but kind of policies. It was great. There were a bunch of ideas that I'll bring to community outreach as other districts are doing to get information out to people. And we talked about social media in that one as well as a separate social media one. And we talked about what a valuable communication tool it's been for districts. And the mission of it is kind of defining the purpose and engaging as part of a broader communication strategy. So you want to align it with district goals and have kind of a policy that drives procedure. The social media panel I went to, they talked about how 81% of U.S. adults are on social media at this point. So the point, it was given by the masked social media person. She runs their Facebook pages and their Twitter and everything. And she was saying, look, your districts are already online right now. So if the school committee members are not, you're not really telling your part of the story. So she kind of talked about some of the things, the ways that districts are using it effectively. There was the superintendent on there who, their district wasn't online at all, and he just created it. His page actually looks a lot like ours, and it's kind of putting out positive things that the schools were doing, and how to do that effectively, how to develop a good social media policy. MASC has a template on their website, so that might be something worth looking at too. But it was great. And then there were some, personally, there were some school committee members there that did a good job kind of engaging on social media. They were on there before they got elected, and then they got elected and are doing a good job kind of managing both roles online, and kind of, I found it very helpful to try to, there are certain pitfalls with open meeting law and things like that. It's kind of how to navigate those. And I had mentioned this to Michelle. I don't know how everyone else feels about it. It's possible they would come and do a training for us on social media at some point. I'm happy to look into that if anyone is interested. So just let me know.
Okay.
But it was great. I highly recommend it too.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Libby, how about you?
So Carrie and I both attended a panel called Providing Your New Superintendent with High Quality Direction and Support, which will be very pertinent to us next year. And basically, it was a really, really good sales pitch for a program that they have called the New Superintendent Induction Program. And it lasts 3 years, and they provide hours of coaching and days of instruction and a mentor for your new superintendent. And they help the superintendent and the school committee understand what the expectations should be in a timeline, so that we don't all get like, well, nothing's happening, or well, what do we do, and all that. We come up with a strategic plan together and roll it out in a very planned way. And the overall cost of the program is $12,600. So it would be, seems to me like a very worthwhile thing to consider in our very near
Libby,
future.
was that over 3 years?
Over 3 years, yes.
So I'm sorry, 12,000, did you say?
12,600 for the 3 years.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, that's
All
great.
right. That was really good. I went to a few, one of them was the role of the chair. Eye-opening. I probably should have taken it 6 months ago, but it's okay. I learned it now. But I learned. It's so funny. I had like pieces of paper, and like every page had like notes, sort of normal, and then I was like, oh, I'm running out of space. They're like all over the side, so I'm transcribing them all into some Word documents to send everyone, because there was some really interesting information about the role of the student representative on the school committee that we might want to think about. We can't change Emma's rules now because she wasn't aware of sort of how expansive that role could be. There was guidance on and new information coming out about the superintendent evaluation forms. So just a lot of really good information. So I'm trying to transcribe all my notes into something more readable to share with folks. But if Libby and Carrie, if you have anything too, maybe we could put it in the next packet just for information for folks. All right. So thank you. All right. Subcommittee reports. I'll start with Carlos. Long-range planning.
So long-range planning through Libby, with the assistance of John, Ed, and myself, we attended the CPC this week, and Libby gave a beautiful presentation. The pitch asking for $88,000 for the playground at Plymouth River. So we received very positive feedback, and we are hopeful that we will get the money. So if anyone knows anyone at the CPC, make a call. I think they'll be deciding that in January. So let's hope for that. And thank you, Libby. Great job.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also, you are all invited, including all the directors and principals, to attend a walkthrough at the Plymouth River on December 1st at 8:30 a.m. We have invited all the leadership in town to attend. We usually every year choose a school to do a walkthrough. This year is Plymouth River. We are in the process of getting $1 million towards the windows there. That was part of mitigation money from the developers. We are hoping that we get that money all together, but that's not going to be quite enough to replace the windows. So we wanted to bring the leadership there so they can walk through and see a couple of needs. And hopefully we'll have to decide eventually what we're going to do, whether we are with the windows, yeah. So I'll leave that there. So everyone is invited.
December 1st?
December 1st at 8:30. Anything else, John, on that?
All right. Great. Okay. Sorry. How about anything from policy?
No, so policy, we haven't met yet. We're meeting on December 7th at
12:30?
noon.
All right. Community outreach?
So right now there's a meeting scheduled for November 27th, but I wanted to hear from, I guess, Libby and Carrie, whether we want to keep that date or maybe push it out to after the policy meeting, because I know in policy we'll discuss social media again. Also, we won't have, the screening committee won't be finished with their work, so I almost feel it's a bit premature to meet on November 27th when we're kind of waiting for these other meetings to conclude. So I wanted to get your feedback on that. I haven't sent you an agenda for that meeting, whether we want to still meet on that day or not.
I don't mind hearing more about what I learned at the conference.
Yeah, it might be good to meet just to talk about a communication strategy, even if we don't know who the person is going to be or who the people are for the superintendent. Maybe talk about a strategy for getting the information out there. So it might be worth meeting before they decide.
Okay.
All right, so I'll let you
Have
and
you
me.
heard any more from
November 27th.
Stacker, too, about
So I would
the
request-
website development?
I would request the December meeting, bringing up the website issues, because of what's transpired the last 3 weeks, we've not had the opportunity as we planned
Right.
to do
Okay.
the, I got marching orders from the subcommittee to find quotes from multiple vendors, and that's all in progress. I just don't know that it'll be done by the 27th.
Right.
So
Okay.
we would appreciate, given the last month,
Yeah.
just a little bit more time to get that done for you.
Okay. All right, no problem. All right. Thanks, Kay. Anything for salary negotiations?
We're in the midst of, screening committee is in the midst of interviewing people, and just December 6th, we'll have our meeting. And other than that, not much that I can share.
No, that's fine. And is that 7 PM?
So, yeah,
On the
7 PM on December 6th.
6th. Okay. And that's a Thursday night, right?
Mhm.
Okay, great. All right, Special Ed Subcommittee, we met last Wednesday. It was a really well-attended meeting. Dr. Vinnis was there, so thank you for being there. We did a brief overview of the Hingham Middle School evaluation, just sort of a little update from the newsletter, community newsletter that Dr. Vinnis had sent out. We went over goals that we are going to discuss with Dr. Gallo when she gets back, just goals related to special education. And then we had a discussion about the observation request form for the schools. Our next meeting is, and I'm sorry, I believe it's December 12th. It is this, okay, December 12th. It will be right before the CPAC meeting again at the Hingham Public Library.
What time is that, do you know?
We usually meet at 6 PM. Any liaison reports? Snap?
So I
Anything?
attended the high school council, and I just want to say that was a very positive, meeting. Did a great job, Principal Swanson. So that's all.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
To piggyback on the council, I attended the PRS School Council today and was asked to do a public service announcement. The school council at Plymouth River is looking to fill a slot for the community rep. Now, that is a Hingham resident, a non-parent, and a non-staff member. So it would appeal to a grandparent, a person who hasn't started their families yet but might be interested. One of the members did that initially before she started her family. Someone who's interested in education or kids. If there's an interest out there, would you contact the principal at PRS, and that number is 781-741-1530.
Great, thanks.
A couple years ago, I reached out to Barbara Farnsworth at the Senior Center, and she found a great rep to come join the South School Council. So she just kind of is hooked in. So it might be a good idea to contact
We'll do
them.
that tomorrow.
It's a great idea. That's a great idea. All right. Any other liaison reports? All right.
Actually, the SNAP
Oh,
winter
yeah.
programs are coming. So
Yes.
we're doing it's bowling, boxygen, yoga, Zumba, basketball, and swimming, and then hip hop. So those are all coming, and they should be live very soon. So
Great.
SouthShoreSnap.com.
Awesome. I know.
HEF.
Yeah.
So last week, the president of HEF had a open house at her house, and Jamie and
Katie.
Always that happens. Gave a presentation to everybody to update them on our STEM initiatives, and I learned that Fidelity was there as well because they gave $10,000. So thank you to Fidelity for that. And Katie and Jamie both did a good job on their presentations. Thank you for all of your efforts in this new endeavor.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you. So our next meeting is December 3rd at 7 o'clock. And I believe that is our only school committee meeting in the month of December, because we have the holidays, and then also because there are a lot of subcommittee meetings that month. So one full regularly scheduled school committee meeting December, and it'll be December 3rd. And with that,
Salary negotiations is also full.
yes, and sorry, yes, and then that will be that
and
same
then
week.
December 6th.
Yeah.
We will be together again in December because in all likelihood we'll be scheduling candidate visits to Hingham or going to visit people as well. So be prepared that you don't get the month off.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
And we'll have the community and the staff and those also meet with the candidates too. So it's not just us meeting with them, but so be prepared for December to join us.
Yes. All right. Well, with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Carrie, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right, meeting adjourned.